biodegradable, right?
In accordance with all laws.
Live from the Plutopia News Network, this is the Plutopia Happy Hour. Our guest tonight is our friend Kevin Welch from EFF Austin. The unusual suspects are here. Squeamish Joy. I'm Scoop Sweeney. I'm unusual. And my unusual partner in crime, John Lebkowski, is right over there.
I'm here.
Everyone's got to be somewhere.
I am here, and I suppose that I should.
But are you all there, John?
The reason I'm hesitating is because I'm trying to do three things at a time. But what I should be doing is saying that we're going to talk about the internet tonight.
The internet, I remember that. That's that funny
Yeah.
thing that gets us all in trouble sometimes.
But it's not your grandfather's internet anymore. It's changed.
My grandfather's internet was the Pony Express, I think.
Did your internet like make you have to walk uphill to school both ways back in your day?
That's right. Actually,
in freezing weather.
Yeah, I had to get to my ISP uphill sometimes, but
my internet
poor
had a
connectivity.
my internet had a little rotary dial on it that I had to fiddle with in order to get it to do anything.
I mean, fairly speaking, as I cut out throughout this entire episode, you'll see that my internet still makes me walk uphill to get it. So
I'm just now like thinking about trying to load modern websites on an old 28 kbps connection. I'm like, yeah, you're going to be waiting an hour just for a web page.
That is true.
wow.
I do miss that old sound that the dial-up modems used to make. Well, they still make, I guess, if you found a
If
place
you're
to
using
connect
one, yeah.
I
You
can
don't
set
hear
it-
very many of those anymore, do you?
You can set it as your phone ringtone. You can get it.
I
like
still
when your
have a
phone rings.
1200 baud modem that goes with my Radio Shack transportable computer. I keep that around as a good doorstop and paperweight.
Let's see. Okay, give me a minute here. I'm
Do
gonna.
you still have your
gonna try
AOL
something.
account? That's what's important.
I have a bunch of AOL membership or sign-up discs, the ones they used to send to everyone, because we took them and drilled holes in them and hung them from a tree in our yard and made great Christmas decorations.
We did that too one year. We totally used the AOL disc for art. It was awesome. I mean, what else could you do with them?
Art for art's sake. Oh, there you go. Deja voodoo.
Oh my God, I'm getting so excited. I'm getting so excited.
I be right back, starting a noise rock band.
Okay.
Wow, blast from the past.
That was satisfying.
It really was. Thank you. That was nice.
Well, we've come a long way from those days. That's for sure. And some of the things that have changed. One thing is, so we went through this whole period where Facebook sort of became the interface to the internet for a whole lot of people, and Twitter became a huge deal. Huge numbers of people aggregated on both of those platforms. And now things are shaking out a bit. Facebook decided it was going to try to create a metaverse and use virtual reality and make that a crucial part of its business model. And it really isn't working. And pretty much anybody who had thought much about VR could have told them it wasn't going to work. So I'm really not sure what the hell they were doing, but they blew a lot of money on that. But Facebook is still there, and it hadn't changed.
I guess the idea
radically.
sounded less crazy when everybody was stuck at home. Still ill-advised, but maybe slightly less ill-advised than it seems now.
Well, you know, you read Snow Crash and you get excited about it.
Mm.
But Snow Crash. I mean, even Neil Stevenson would tell you. Of course, he's got his own VR thing that he's working on now, but he'd tell you that he didn't really consider that to be factual. It was a work of science fiction.
Well,
So-
were you implying that he wasn't saying it was a documentary?
Exactly.
A
And then the-
documentary of what's coming.
And then the other thing is that Twitter was actually incredibly vulnerable and fragile, and we didn't really realize it until Elon Musk took over, and all the seams started showing, and the whole thing feels like it's kind of coming apart. And at the same time, people are leaving and they're moving into onto other platforms, and onto the Fediverse,
I mean,
which is something that's worth
Didn't
talking about.
Elon cut a few of those threads though? I mean, was it really just all seams showing?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure every web company, if you fired 80% of the staff and threw out all the microservices, I don't know how well any of them would hold up.
Yeah, I feel like that's a little. I don't know how weak Twitter was or how much it became sabotaged, and so I think that's up for debate a little bit at
Well,
least.
Well, there's a big question about why he bought the thing, why he put all that money into it, and what his intentions were. If it was not to try to turn a profit, and it was obvious that he wasn't going to be able to turn much of a profit with it, right?
Yeah, well, it seems like he was basically pulling a big old Elon-style goof that he thought he'd be able to weasel out of, but the legal eagles that got involved said, "No, you can't weasel out of this. Give us $44 billion or
Yeah.
whatever it was."
Well, he also doesn't seem to really understand. He doesn't understand social media, I guess. I mean, he doesn't understand platforms where there's a high degree of interactivity. I think that he wanted to dispense with moderation, and you can't really do that. You have to have some form of moderation on a platform like that.
Right. It's like he doesn't understand that, that there's free speech as a general principle of open discussion, but it's entirely different when that in digital realms are open to all kinds of gaming and abuse just by the nature of the place, because these digital systems, they operate at the speed of electricity. You can literally write bots that do things thousands of times a second just to cause chaos. You can't it's not the same as the town square or whatever he wants to call it. There's some different rules at play.
And again, I feel like we keep giving Mr. Musk a pass. Is it that he doesn't understand or that he does not give a shit? I feel like he got involved with something that he actually, I tend to lean towards he sabotaged something because he wanted to sabotage something. I don't think he's that stupid to say he didn't understand. He's got plenty of advisors. He's got billions of dollars. So he's got the capacity to understand whatever he wants to. And so I feel like we're giving him a pass a little bit. By
I
saying,
agree. We
he didn't
shouldn't
know what he was getting
free him
into.
of all moral culpability. That being said, as somebody, with Elon's previous endeavors, with first, with cars and rockets, I'm not a rocket engineer or a car engineer. So, I don't have the ability to critique the quality of what he's saying. But now that he started saying things about software development, which I am a software developer, I can tell you there are many times he does not know what he's talking about.
Yeah,
Well,
and
his rocketry
fair. That's a
and
fair point. It's a fair point.
Yeah, his rockets and his autos and bought him kind of a get out of jail free card because they pretty much worked quite well. But if you look at some of the disasters that have encountered, it kind of indicates he really doesn't give a shit about safety and security of the rest of the world. As long as he can get that rocket off the launch pad, that's all he cares about. When that big one blew up, it put a big halt to all of his launches because it dispersed big pieces of rocket all over that part of South Texas.
Well, I believe that he's a genius when he invents an electric rocket.
Okay,
When he launches an electric rocket into space.
Rocket that can tweet.
but you would need a really long plug-in for that thing.
It's true.
And
Well,
where's
you
the
have to have a
charging station?
port, at the other. Yeah, you'd have to have another charging station.
I think he's a kind of the big example of something that's been impacting a lot of cities, particularly my friends in San Francisco, are basically singing the dirge for what used to be a great city has now been put to, basically it's being destroyed by the tech bros that have taken over in San Francisco. If you talk to people who have lived there a long time, it's getting really bad for anyone that's not a really wealthy tech bro.
I mean, I would not probably disagree, especially considering even here in Austin, it is getting harder and harder if you do not work in the tech industry to make a living here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I will say that I think that there is San Francisco's not as bad as I was led to believe, because I just went to San Francisco, and the word on the street before I went out there was that homeless people were everywhere, crime was everywhere, that you wouldn't be safe in San Francisco. I mean, we were actually kind of worried about it. But I did what any sane person would do and watched a bunch of YouTube videos to try to get a sense of what's really going on there. And one thing I noticed was that the people who were complaining loudest about crime in San Francisco were very right-wing Republicans who were making the point that San Francisco is a city run by Democrats, therefore it's riddled with crime. Well, it's not riddled with crime. It's got problems. We have problems in Austin too. I mean, every city has problems. San Francisco, at least where that's concerned, it didn't strike me as being much worse than any big city I've been in. But one thing I do think is a problem in San Francisco is the fact that, and this is something, we might never have foreseen, but when COVID happened, people who were going into San Francisco downtown and working in those office buildings started working from home, sheltering in place, right? Well, they never came back because it turns out that works just fine. But that has an impact that nobody really predicted it, and we're kind of stuck with it, which is all these office buildings in downtown San Francisco are pretty much empty.
Yeah.
And the stores that line the streets in downtown San Francisco that depend on a huge stream of customers from among those people who come to work there every day don't have people coming to work there every day. So they don't have a huge stream of customers. Some of them are closing.
I think, it's not just a problem in San Fran. I think it's a problem in a lot of tech-centric cities that I recently, last year, visited Seattle for the first time. And my dad, who lived there a number of years, told me that I really wasn't seeing the downtown as it would have been until very recently, that it might seem kind of crowded or busy, but he assured me it's not at all busy compared to pre-COVID.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is similar to what I saw in Houston in the 80s when the oil business went into the toilet, and you could see through all the office buildings. There were all these big office buildings, and they were all empty. And you're seeing that now. There's a lot of stuff that I've read in the business pages about the Armageddon that's going to hit all these big office towers that are being thrown up everywhere, and all of a sudden they can't rent them. There's a lot in Austin that are only partially occupied, and they may be unoccupied soon.
Big difference though between what's happening now and in the 80s is in the 80s everybody was unemployed. and our employment rate right now is, pretty decent. So those office buildings aren't empty because everybody's been laid off, and they're on. Even though I know we've had some layoffs in the tech space, and that's happening. Still, we've got pretty low unemployment rates, and these
Overall
office buildings are
unemployment
empty because
is-
people are sitting at home.
Right.
Oh,
Overall
really?
unemployment is low, even though there were all the
Yeah.
layoffs in tech. And
There are
yeah.
economic assumptions that are based on the belief or understanding that a lot of people will be aggregating in the same place, and you could put markets there and that they'll be healthy and that sort of thing. And now that stuff is a lot more distributed. So, it's sort of like, there's the question about, I mean, how do stores even survive right now? There's big box stores like, how does a Nordstrom survive? Nordstrom's is closing down in downtown San Francisco.
Yeah.
there's
because
actually
Their whole mall closed down there.
We lost. I'm sorry, y'all, but we lost Nordstrom's Rack in Austin. Y'all probably didn't notice, but
I'll pour one out.
some of us.
Well, actually,
some
we
of
held
us
awake
did.
for it.
Okay,
I mean, there's actually some interesting parallels, I think, between what's happening with our cities and actually, I think, kind of speaking of the internet, where like
yeah.
the Web 2.0 era was this era of mass centralization where everybody got on MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, etc. And, we also saw the rise of these concentrated tech cities, San Francisco, Austin, Seattle, etc. And now, both possibly precipitated by all the fallout from COVID. We have people are leaving these cities because they can remote work, being more decentralized. And due to various problems with centralization, a lot of people are getting very fed up with these centralized tech platforms. We've talked about Twitter, but there's like literally a mutiny going on at Reddit right now.
Yeah, there's mutinies everywhere. Yeah, let me show you something that there's a lot of people that are doing what I've been doing for a long time. And let me share the screen if I can. And where did it go? Oh, there we go. And this is what I do to distribute music. And there are thousands of people doing this because they got tired of being replaced, by Apple Music and all the people that's like, we own all the music. There are a lot of independent broadcasters such as I who do that sort of thing. And it's a pretty viable thing right now. There are a lot of people doing really well. I don't do it for making money. I just do it because I enjoy, doing the DJ thing occasionally. But there's a lot of independent platforms out there. Whatever your desires are, you can find a group of people who are doing the same thing. So it's a matter of finding those groups of people that are doing an independent project rather than a big, giant Facebookish platform.
It's kind of a return to the early days of the web where you didn't have one site like Reddit where everything was. You've now got niche interest forums and Discord groups and whatever, and that seems to be where people are kind of, it's not the old web all over again because we have a lot of the modern conveniences and tools and innovations that have been invented over the last 20 years. But there does seem to be a profound sense from a lot of people that we all took the centralization pill because it was really convenient and easy, but we're all starting to wonder if the downsides didn't outweigh the good.
Yeah, it was hard to digest once you got too much of that centralized.
Lots of side effects.
But finding a niche is fine as far as I'm concerned. I enjoy being part of something that's not so widespread. Just something where you actually have you can control your own destiny. Basically, it may be a small destiny, but that's fine, and that's part of the world.
People have credited the internet with like essentially killing off the cultural phenomenon of subcultures. Maybe we'll see some of them come back when people are hiding in private discords, literally building a culture the internet at large doesn't see or influence.
It's interesting because I think a lot of subcultures actually are already outside of the internet realm anyway. I mean, and so it's not that they went away, they just became harder to see or whatever, which is kind of what they want to begin
Well,
with.
it's
which is
probably
fine.
how they like it, exactly.
It kind of serves their needs. So I'm curious, when you talk about decentralization and you're talking about it, what did I hear? The Fediverse? Is that what I read? Was that the
Fediverse, yeah.
The Fediverse
What?
is it's a term that essentially, so it's talking, it's a portmanteau of federation or federated and universe. So Fediverse.
Right.
Federation is a term that comes up in network theory. It's about the different ways, the internet at the end of the day is a network of networks. And
Right.
there's various theories about how you can organize networks of networks. The one that probably we're most familiar with, this kind of very centralized model, you can have centralized models. They're also kind of called hub and spoke models.
Yeah.
But it's this idea that you've got a sort of central node. If it's like for the web, it's a server. Or if, for social media, it's one of these platforms. And then you have a whole bunch of client nodes or user nodes who all talk to that central node to get what they need or send their messages, etc. There's also at the other extreme, there's what's called peer-to-peer, which you may have heard come up in contexts like, BitTorrent or something. But peer-to-peers, when there is no central computer, any node in the network can talk to any other node in the network. It's and it has trade-offs from the other approach. It's more resilient, more resistant to censorship, more resistant to the central actor mediating between the individual users and affecting how they want to interact with each other. The major downside of peer-to-peer is it scales extremely poorly and is really inefficient. It's often very, very hard just from a computer memory and processing standpoint to do peer-to-peer very well. Federation is a network model that's sort of between the two extremes, where you have sort of spoke nodes that a bunch of other nodes talk to, but there aren't like just a few central spoke nodes. There's like hundreds, thousands of them, and all those central spoke nodes all talk to each other.
Yeah, they have a way to connect so that data can move across those nodes and reach any other nodes. So for instance, on Mastodon, you have a bunch of different servers and various people sign up for Mastodon and they pick a server that they're going to be on. And some of the servers are small, some of them are large, but they all have the ability to connect with the rest of the Fediverse so that they can pick up data. I'm hesitating as I talk because I'm thinking about exceptions and kinks in this and so forth. I mean, for instance, I could connect my server to the Fediverse, but I could also block a bunch of servers that I don't like. So for instance, if I'm not happy with a set of servers because of their politics, I can just block them. And that way I'm not exchanging data with them and they can't get access to my node.
The easiest sort of, I think, example that people are familiar with of a federated technology would be email and email servers, where, certain email services are huge, so huge they almost function as centralized services, i.e. Gmail. But there's also a bunch of smaller email servers and providers, and they can all talk to each other. But as John was saying, email servers, like if a bunch of email servers are like, that server is just blasting all of us with spam, they can block that server basically. And similarly, so in email, if let's say this rarely happens, but let's say your email provider didn't want to provide you email services anymore. Well, that's not like the end of the world, because you can go get email on another server, and you can even still send and receive email with all the people who were on the old server that kicked you off potentially, unless they block your new server basically. It's like you aren't tied to your email provider. Communicate with your friends and acquaintances. In current centralized social media, if Facebook or Twitter kicks you off, you can't talk to your friends still on there. The idea of the Fediverse is you can all move between servers. Even servers can potentially block each other. It doesn't matter. It doesn't get in the way of people still being able to talk to who they want to talk to, regardless of the politics of a server.
Can I ask I'm going to ask a question really quick for understanding and what y'all both said. So in the decentralization, you're still tied to a platform, though. Like the way you described the email made a lot of sense to me. So in the Federation, so Facebook, for example, could choose not to be a part of the Fediverse as a whole. Is that, and they would just like block everything out.
And it's not a part of the Fediverse.
Although Facebook has announced plans to potentially make a Fediverse service.
And this is my question. It's like, so these different platforms basically on some level, I mean, I know that like Mastodon and Discord and things, they're already open platform or open source in the way that you said, or in the way that they function. But they're that way by design and by nature. These other existing platforms are going to have to decide if they want to participate.
Absolutely. I mean, the way to understand it is that at the technical level, the reason email works is all email servers have agreed on a standard set of protocols they all use to talk to each other. Like if you remember back in the days when you more had to manually configure your email, you probably heard of some of these: POP3, IMAP, SMTP, etc. Yeah. And so these protocols are how email servers talk to each other. Basically, social media did not have a standard. There was no way for you to export yourself from Facebook and then input yourself into Twitter. They were fundamentally incompatible technology standards. The Fediverse,
yeah, you were being held hostage.
Essentially. And the Fediverse is powered by a new emerging protocol called ActivityPub, which Activity Publish essentially, but it's an emerging standard for a protocol for social media accounts and interactions between those accounts that is a universal standard. So if you export yourself from one Fediverse service, you can import yourself into another. And there's many technologies in the Fediverse that are all implementing ActivityPub. So like, for instance, Mastodon is sort of the Fediverse version of Twitter. Every Mastodon server is like its own little implementation of Twitter, basically. But there are other ones. Like, for instance, I mentioned that Reddit is having a meltdown. Many users are decamping for a Fediverse ActivityPub Reddit alternative called Lemmy, which is also built on ActivityPub, but is designed to emulate Reddit instead of emulate Twitter. Although what's very cool about this is, unlike now, where you need to be a different digital identity to be on Twitter versus Reddit. They're fundamentally incompatible. In theory, Lemmy and Mastodon are interoperable. You could use your same ActivityPub identity to be on Lemmy if you wanted to.
Well, and in fact, Plutopia.io, our website, has ActivityPub and is on the Fediverse. And that was just a matter of installing an ActivityPub plugin that exists on our WordPress instance. And bingo, we were there.
Well, yeah, it comes to mind that there may be some legal activity coming up with these people that are emulating a Twitter or a Facebook in the Fediverse. And I just can see some law firm going, they're infringing upon the Facebook or the Reddit image. So I can see them filing that kind of...
That would be like saying you're violating somebody's
copyright
or trademark by building a bicycle that looks just like the bicycle that Schwinn makes.
And there's people who will sue for that.
If it's new code, I don't know.
I think the actual real legal concern that may emerge, I mean, I don't put it past the big companies to try to sue, even though I think those would be kind of silly lawsuits. But what I do think is actually a place where we're going to have legal problems with this model is essentially the legal liability of these servers, basically, that currently these big central platforms platforms assume the legal liability, although there's also, of course, Section 230 protections, but, law breaking that goes on their platforms, they, take on the legal mantle risk, and they have teams of lawyers who understand this stuff. Some hobbyist running a little Mastodon instance doesn't necessarily know what their legal requirements as far as content are or aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are a lot of Republican politicians who have 230 in their crosshairs, and they want to kill it.
I mean, they haven't
Well,
yet. Fingers
I don't.
crossed.
I really don't.
Though there's a lot of Democratic politicians
really
who don't like
benefit.
230 either.
They don't benefit
That's
from
true.
killing it. I always thought it was weird that Trump wanted to kill it, because he's a prime example of somebody who benefits from Section
I know,
230.
because
Hard.
no website would host him due to the legal risk of people suing for libel with him on there.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, that's what
Exactly.
comes when people don't really understand what it really means.
Yeah.
There are many of those folks who've actually read what
I'm a
it's
little-
all about.
I'm a little curious how you see this impacting businesses specifically, because
Well,
businesses have invested a lot into these social media platforms, and I've always found it really interesting. Like, a business will invest so much into, say, Facebook, but Facebook owns the audience. The business doesn't have access to the audience. They're just renting space, and Facebook really can do whatever they want to that audience without that business owner having any control over that. So it's an interesting concept to, look at this open space from a business perspective, not just from an individual user perspective in terms of.
well, that's disruption. I mean,
And that-
disruption happens.
And that's
And-
been one of the major
Yeah.
issues people have had with the centralization. We're all at the whims of what Facebook or Twitter
Right.
or Reddit say their terms of service are, which are often opaque and not clearly explained or defined. I mean, it's easy to roll your eyes when somebody who is being a bigot whines they face some consequences for it, but there's a real complaint that these platforms rules, they'll like put you in Facebook jail and you have no
Right.
idea what you did that got you in there, basically, and you're just at their whims and mercy. And maybe you fundamentally ideologically disagree with what they think is appropriate or not on the platform. You don't have an alternative. In theory, with something like Mastodon, you can find a server where the moderation rules agree with what you think they should be.
But do
We
you
did-
see businesses moving into this space more progressively, so to speak? Like, do you think that average businesses will understand the Fediverse, so to speak?
Well, you got to reach a
And
critical
start
mass of
taking
customers
advantage.
before they're going to bother, I would think.
Well,
And
it depends on the business and how they have been using social media. Some of them, you may use it in a way that's kind of an exploitation, like getting social media data and that sort of thing, and leveraging that. And really, on the Fediverse is set up so that you don't have that kind of data capture going on.
Right, there isn't really an easy
theoretically.
way in the Fediverse to just
Mhm.
like scrape everybody on the Fediverse's data and know everything about everyone. It's just the architecture makes it far more difficult to attempt something like that. I'm
Mhm.
not saying some evil marketing company won't try or find some flaw in the protocol.
I
and
don't even
figure
talk
it
about-
out. But
I don't assume all business is evil. I'm more curious from just a general understanding. It's like, as things shift and
Yeah, no, I
businesses
didn't think
usually
you were.
want to go where people go.
I think that, this is sort of like the social media disrupted traditional marketing, and it
Mhm.
disrupted traditional advertising. And now this way of doing things is going to be disruptive too. But it's disruptive in that it kind of discourages some of the like commercial things that
Mhm.
that have been so much part of social media, where it's centralized and where there can be algorithms that kind of control what you see and all that. They don't try to do that on Mastodon, and they probably won't try to do that with Blue Sky, which is another alternative. Jack Dorsey, who was a founder of Twitter, felt at some point that Twitter wasn't really built the way it should have been built. And in his head, he saw that there should have been something more like what the Fediverse is. And, some people believe that Twitter should be a public utility. It's like a town square, right? It should be a public thing and not a thing that is owned as a business. So Jack Dorsey started building a new thing called Blue Sky, which is really more of a protocol, and it's kind of like ActivityPub. He was kind of moving in that direction. Set something up where various applications can use the same protocols and can interact with each other that way.
Yeah,
but there's actually a Blue Sky app right now that is the initial instance of this, and they're kind of still in development. But this Blue Sky app looks a whole lot like Twitter. It operates a lot like Twitter.
Yeah, the fact that these new services won't allow you to do all the nefarious things that Facebook and Twitter were doing with the scraping the data and exploiting their user base, that's going to discourage a lot of these big companies from investing in any of these new protocols, these new.
So just as
they don't need to, because these things are being built for other reasons. And what this means is that you don't have a centralized user base and set of user data that you can exploit. It makes it a lot harder to exploit data.
Although,
but your money has to come from somewhere, and it won't come from the ad agencies who will, not like the way that it's set up.
And
Mastodon's money comes from its supporters,
which gets into actually one of the things that may impede Mastodon's growth, which is that, Facebook was taking on all the costs of hosting all this content and paying for it with the selling the data and the ads. This decentralized model, there's already issues where some of the larger Mastodon instances are facing extraordinary hosting costs. And because there isn't all the data and advertising, you can donate to the server admin, but there's real questions of whether just donation charity based asking the users to give money will scale with some of these larger instances. Actually,
well, I know the main Mastodon instance that was set up had one of the first things they did apparently was set up a Patreon account, and there's a lot of people who are subscribed to that account, so they're getting a lot of money, at least that set of people. And I think it's reasonable to assume that if you build a server and you have a bunch of users on there and they really don't want to be exploited, that they would be willing to give you money and that you could even charge for it.
Which is a fair assumption, I think, because already we see the growth and success of email services like ProtonMail and Tutanota, where you pay for them, but part of why you're paying for them is you're not going to sell info in my emails to harvest to marketers. It's encrypted and private.
I just want to caveat also that I wasn't asking that question with any intention of nefariousness. I work to build value-based businesses, and I actually believe there are good companies out there. So
I actually believe that too. Actually,
and I understood what you were saying. The reason I mentioned
okay, I'm sorry.
I was going to say the reason I mentioned disruption was because, you were asking out of concern for business and not necessarily.
I was just asking out of curiosity, not concern at all, actually.
Oh, okay.
And I was asking because I was thinking of it as, if we think about CX, which is customer experience, and how that has really shifted the way that we look at the way business functions end to end. Businesses can't get away with quite as much as they used to be able to, as hard as they try. And so to me, for value-driven businesses that really have a lot to offer their customers, this seems like a really great opportunity to build community where you're actually very connected to your community. And you don't have the barrier of somebody like Facebook in between you and your customer. You can actually really develop like a cohesive, more purpose-driven community. So y'all took it in a direction that was kind of way different than where my mind was at, which is fine.
We're just used to hearing that stuff.
That's really important too. No, I know. I'm not.
But I do think
I don't come from a negative perspective out of the gate.
Well, you're offering an interesting perspective, actually, and you're right that I think there's very creative uses people might use for this. There's nothing to say you couldn't have a Fediverse instance that is literally a community around a small business in some way. Absolutely. And it could really make that business more directly integrated into the actual lives and needs of its customers and supporters. And actually, I would believe a business would be more likely to treat its customers with respect and less likely to screw them over if it's like even the people who run the business feel like they are in a community with the people
Absolutely.
supporting.
Yeah, that's quite like
that's exactly what I was coming
GoFundMe, getting a business started by GoFundMe or that kind of thing. The only limitation is you have to be really good and have to be really pleasing a bunch of people. Yeah, I started out early on in listener-sponsored radio with Pacifica Radio, and it was great that it was supported only by the listeners. But the problem is there are a lot of hands out for those people's money elsewhere, so you really are at the whim of the economy. Really, if the economy goes into the toilet, then the listener donations tend to go away.
And that's business in general. I mean, you got to keep your customers happy regardless of how you're engaging with them, so to speak. And I think what interests me about the Fediverse is that, again, it really, if a business wants to use this to create or build community, it gives them a lot more control over how they engage with that community and how that community can engage back with them. So I think it's like, actually, the potential for it is really powerful.
Yeah, and I'm a big advocate for cooperative businesses.
I was even going to say that I could see where cooperative businesses would, they could really synergize with these Fediverse ideas.
Non-greedy cooperative business.
Well, I mean, that's, my business is Tapas Innovation. And a big part of what I do is connect businesses to businesses who need each other, that I'm not necessarily the person they need, but I just understand. And so, that type of and it's all value driven, because businesses I connect people to are vetted based on values, and I understand the people that I'm working with, so it's all integrated that way. And I just feel like with Facebook, and I'm picking on Facebook, but they're big, they're there.
They can take it. Go ahead.
They piss me off all the time, because they really do. They own your customer. If you're a business on Facebook, you do not own your Facebook customer, period. And so you can spend a lot of money. And to your point, it could go away in a minute. And I've seen it happen to a lot of businesses get crushed after investing, years into that. And so I just think it's a very interesting opportunity for businesses who want to connect with a customer, who want to be authentic and not, aren't looking. I mean, there's plenty of ways to do non-integrous things. I just think this is an interesting opportunity for
it is. I suppose it might still, though, if a business is going to think about starting its own, say, mass honor activity pub server of some kind, it's while the tech is progressing rapidly, it still requires some technical knowledge and know-how just to standing up your own website versus paying somebody else to do it for you. So a lot of businesses, that the whole pitch of Facebook was, it's not technically hard, we handle all that for you.
Right. But I came from the financial services world where when they were introducing social media, I would have to sit down with compliance officers and explain to them, I'm sorry, we cannot append a tweet with a 1,400 character compliance statement. So, I mean, they had to figure out how to allow their, financial advisors to use the social media. It's no different. And it's no different with AI either. We're going to have the same things. And AI in 5 years will be something else, by the time we all figure out how we want to use it.
The joke I keep making about AI is that, every single one of these hot takes smart people have about it right now are all going to look hilariously wrong in 10 years. All of them, including my own predictions.
Absolutely. How could it not? I mean, I agree with that. I think that's really a good point. It's just, I think that this is, we're in such a transitional shift, and we are moving from the information space into true connectivity, like in a way of just like really deep integration on all levels. And so I think the Fediverse to me is very exciting. It's
definitely the non-dystopian developments in the internet that have me excited. And it most reminds me of the early days of the web and that sense of invention and discovery and people just wanting to do cool things and make cool communities together. Because I look at a lot of the other recent developments, like services like Twitter and Reddit, having their problems. And I look at, I mean, it's just you look as well at like you don't even know what all these AI enabled services are going to do to the internet yet. There's
Right.
concerns about just content degradation caused by endless AI training loops. So, there's a lot to worry about with the future of the internet, which is why I like focusing on the Fediverse, because that gives me some hope.
Yeah, it's a great plan, and it would probably eliminate what's been happening to a lot of great new services and technologies. As soon as they look good and are performing, someone's going to come along, one of the big guys is going to come along and buy it. And all of a sudden, it's no longer that funky little service out there. It's part of Microsoft or Apple or Amazon or Muskville, whatever.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, even the relatively interesting, cool ones that have, not been totally, to use Mr. Cory Doctorow's term, and shitified yet. Like even cooler services like Twitch. Twitch is owned by Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who owns Discord?
I don't know, but somebody nefarious probably does. Let's find out.
I don't think so. I actually think that Discord is. Well, I'm not really sure.
But
That's
the
worth
big problem
researching.
in our
Oh, it's still privately held. It's
That's
it's
what I
not
thought.
I thought it was
Yeah.
privately held, but I don't know by who.
No, they're not owned by anybody bigger yet.
yeah. But the big
They
may
problem
not wanna
in
be.
the big problem in our economy is the influence that capital is influencing how things develop or don't develop. All the hedge funds, all the people that invest in companies, just it's gotten poisonous. Where you look at all these great things that were, big companies that all of a sudden were just bankrupt because, hedge funds gave them all this money, gave them too much money probably for what they were doing, and all of a sudden the bill comes due and they're out of business. And you're seeing that a lot more recently.
And I think we're also seeing that, we've had increasingly essential parts of modern life have become dependent on these platforms. Many government agencies went all in on Twitter as their official way to outreach to the public, and all that with the current chaos. It's like, we literally see vital resources can suddenly be gone, and everybody scrambles for an alternative. Reddit has become the largest repository of reliable information on the internet, and it may all go away soon, potentially.
Well, that's always the risk when you're successful on the internet. Someone is either going to find some way to kill you or buy you.
Well, and I mean, like, I was reading a blog post about a lot of this, and, it made the very snarky point of that, Reddit, really doesn't care how many people they alienate, because they have, they want to complete their IPO, because the fundamental problem with Reddit is that how do you possibly spin that just hosting conversations can ever be a profitable venture?
If you do it right, it won't be.
Right. That's the thing. I mean, the same article made, I thought, a very good point, where it was just pointing out that, the best things on the internet have always been created and run entirely by volunteers and donations. You look at things like Wikipedia or the Internet Archive, and the few
Or
times,
the well.
and the few times one of the big tech companies actually, by accident, half the time makes something actually useful, they eventually ruin it or kill it. Like, look at what happened to Google Reader, and now we see it happening to Reddit,
The well has been around since 1985, I think it is, or around that time. And that's a pretty long time to have been in existence. What that means is that the people who formed the community on the well have all kind of grown old together. And really, a lot of the people who are there now, there's some younger people there, but there's a lot of older people there because they've kind of been there all along. And the well went through various stages where they tried to figure out a way to make money with it. Bruce Cates famously bought the well at one time. He was an entrepreneur who had he had a shoe company. I'm ditzing on the name of the shoe company right now, even though I used to own some of those shoes. but um, he never really found the magic for making money with it. But part of that was because the well stubbornly sort of refused to give in to any kind of grift, you know? So it's just continued along. And let's see, Salon was the last company that owned the well. And they decided to sell it off. They thought they could sell just the name well.com to some medical company that would pay a lot of money for it. But the users of the well came together and raised the money to buy the thing and have continued operating it as a business. It's not a business that is like making a bunch of money. It's not in the red, but it's not making a huge amount of money. And that, you know, that's kind of the way it works. If
I
you have to have the principles, the community principles to kind of hold it together without trying to exploit.
Yeah, and I think the central problem comes down to so many of the things that we all use the internet for are fundamentally not profitable and never going to be profitable. And without, you know, infusions of venture capital or, you know, selling data with the nebulous promise that it will like magically make sales for businesses, which there's actually a lot of research disputing just how effective that even is.
Yep.
You know, there's an argument that the fundamental business models of the web never worked to begin with, and the sort of emperor's new clothes is starting to happen here, basically, that people are having to start realizing, you know, people just wanting to talk to each other online is not, never will be profitable.
That sounds familiar, John, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, we have found a way to operate a pretty cool little media company without making a dime.
Yeah.
But we've never tried to make a dime.
Oh, it's easy when you don't care about making a dime.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, at this end of our
purpose drives a lot.
lifespan, it's more fun to not have to worry about those things and worry instead about just doing something cool. That's why I worked for many years for the jobs that weren't cool. They were, you know, they were jobs, but this isn't a job anymore.
Well, we do. I should acknowledge that we do try to raise some money, and if people out there
give
want
them money, they won't say,
give us some money because we do have to pay. We have to pay for servers.
Right. You know, but I mean, it's just, it really, you know, I think, you know, of how we've endlessly seen so many of these tech companies just prove there's fundamentally not a profit to be made in what they're doing. Like, you know, Uber and Lyft still can't figure out a business model that really is profitable. And it really seems like a fundamental part of the problem is that a lot of what computers enable is they make certain tasks and activities so easy, there's no profit to be made because there's no real effort. And so nobody's willing to pay for something that's so easy because of the technology that it's practically free at mass scale.
Yeah, recorded music is a good example of that.
Exactly. Like, it's why really trying to, you know, we're already in post scarcity of media. There's a smaller and smaller pool of money people fight over in the arts. I saw somebody put it very succinctly. I think I was reading a Boing Boing post about how there's that, you know, hit country cover of Tracy Chapman's Fast Car that actually got higher on the Hot 100 than the original. And somebody, though, in the comments pointed out, yeah, but hitting number 6 in 1988, you could retire. Hitting number 4 now, probably buy a new truck.
Or buy a nice bottle of wine, perhaps. That's the way the commissions go, or the royalties go these days. I still get royalties, and it's in the 0.21. You get a 21-cent royalty check.
But part of the reason for that is that there's so much stuff out there to listen to. So you really don't. It's hard to build a huge audience. It's hard to like get somebody to want to put a lot of money into one artist, you know.
I want to say, I feel like we are suffering a little bit right now from quality over quantity because it's, you know, people are trying so hard to get the next quickest thing out, and it's not I don't know. I've seen some degradation in
Well,
quality.
I mean, it's because platforms like Netflix, they put all these requirements on the productions they greenlight about you got to shoot it only with these cameras. Like they have this whole long list of rules, and it results in things being very homogenous.
Absolutely. And if
Yeah,
you
I
listen to
mean-
it, you can feel it. Like that's
Not-
definitely true.
Not everybody can have the same high quality that we have at Plutopia.
Yeah.
That's-
Well, there
that's true.
fortunately
You
are a
said
lot
that.
of streaming services that are out there, and it's obvious that they're not going to be big or wealthy, but they're providing a home for the niche productions. The little guys who put together a really cool film or series, and it's not going to be on Netflix or Max or whomever. But it's nice that there are some of them out there, Freevee and some of those guys.
But I got to ask, I keep hearing about influencers who are making millions of dollars on YouTube and Instagram. What's that about?
Well, what it's about is that there are still advertisers paying for all those eyeballs. Basically, YouTube has a giant pool of money, and the creators who are the best at getting those eyeballs to watch their channel get the biggest piece of the money, basically.
But how do they actually make millions of dollars? I just can't imagine that.
Well, it's because YouTube gets paid an insane amount of money from advertisers. I think YouTube, I read something insane, like YouTube has like $40 billion it can distribute between all of its creators.
There's so many things you bring up on YouTube that come with commercials attached, and that's where they make that money.
And actually,
And we can't do that because we don't have enough subscribers.
right, well, and
So
many
hit
of the
that
biggest
subscribe
YouTube-
button.
many of the biggest ones actually will have it's gotten to the point where like a lot of the really big ones will have literally sponsored ads, not as a separate commercial, but like in the stream, so that they can get around people blocking them or skipping them. Basically, with the really artful ones, some of them will just like do a cutaway segment that's easy to skip over, but the really artful ones will like integrate the advertisement into the main content you actually want to watch, such that there is no way to skip it.
That's called product
Yeah.
placement, and there are people and companies that make a bundle of money just for that, putting the Coke can in the scene, or having someone mention the fact that they're driving a Ferrari or driving a Ferrari.
The biggest YouTube creators have gone all in on this time-tested method because they've learned that, if they just have separate ads, people like me will just ad block it and not watch it,
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and you can, it's like I like the Rewatchables is one that I like, where they just basically talk about movies that they like to watch over and over again. It's really kind of fun, and but the way that they advertise is a part of their conversation. There's no way to skip it. They're literally like advertising within the context of their conversation, and it's an advertising segment, but it's just mixed into what it's like you're being advertised to, but it's not. It's just like built into a discussion, and it's like very
right. It's an ad,
fluid.
but as far as ads go, it's sort of like, okay, I know you got to pay the bills, and this is a lot less obnoxious than cutting away to a commercial.
Yeah.
Well,
And they're not scripted. I guess what I like about it, they're not scripted. It's like the advertisers give them some freedom to just sort of like talk about our product, just talk about our product. And sometimes they say stuff that I'm thinking, like, from a brand perspective, I'm thinking, I don't know, is that like great for the brand or not? But at the end of the day, it's really authentic and conversational, so it actually comes across better than an ad.
So I could get away with doing something like saying tomorrow's my birthday, and I'm going to have a bucket out in front of my house, and you can drop by and put some money in there, and I'll talk about you on the next Plutopia Live.
I mean, that's literally essentially how Twitch works. In exchange for feeling like you influence the stream, you give them money and they thank you live on air.
Passing the collection plate. Hallelujah.
Would that work for us if we just told everybody that we would mention them on the show?
You'd be surprised. I
just give
see
us
people
money?
give lots of money on Twitch in exchange for that, believe it or not. I've seen it. It works.
Well, I used
Okay,
to do
people,
a really
go
good
to,
faith healer thing.
Go to plutopia.io, and there's a I think there's a tab there that says support. You can click through to Patreon. You can subscribe, and you could subscribe for as little as $2 a month, but maybe $100 a month would be better.
Yeah, if you give 100, I'll come over and I'll lay my hands on you, and I will heal your acne.
We really don't have. I think we have maybe 1 or 2 Patreon subscribers because we don't do the stuff that you're supposed to do to get the subscribers.
We're not young and groovy.
You're not
Well, it
telling
just
them to
takes work.
smash that like button.
We don't want to
It-
work
it-
hard
It
enough.
should be your final statement at the end of every show. And don't forget, support us on Patreon.
Okay, don't
You just
forget,
gotta
support us on
remind people.
Patreon because we are at the end of the
You
show.
just got to keep reminding
Yeah.
people.
We have 1 minute. We probably have 30 seconds left.
Wow,
30
thanks for
awesome
having me
seconds.
again, John. Fun
Well,
discussion.
thank you for
Thanks for
coming on
being-
short notice.
Good to
my
have
pleasure.
you folks to inspire our audience.
Yeah, I mean, inspiration is a good thing.
Oh, this was fun. I enjoyed this conversation quite a bit.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, it is time.
thank
you,
you,
everyone.
to get that one up. Thank you, sir. We'll see you all next time.
Yeah, I may have been a step down from Bruce Schneier, but hopefully gave your viewers some good content.
No, that was great. Great
Rockstar.
conversation.